So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to our training. We are we're going to go through the Ignite program. It should take us around about an hour. Hopefully, we'll be finished a little bit early so I can answer any questions. Any questions that you have as we're going along, please do feel free to put them in the chat. I find it a little bit, I'm not going to lie, I find it a bit difficult to do the chat and the presentation at the same time. So it might take me a while to get back to you, but I will get back to you on all of the questions. So yeah, Simone, my colleague, is here. She'll say hello now.
Hi.
So Simone works with me in our team with our we have the sport focus and the alternative provision. She's going to be helping me with the PowerPoint because for some reason it doesn't want to share from my computer today. So Simone will be doing that. You might have had some emails from her before. So yeah, let's crack on. Can I have the next slide, please, Simone? So I'm sure many of you have worked with us before. If you haven't, I'll give you a really brief kind of overview of who we are. We work directly with parents and young people and adults to boost confidence and literacy skills. We work alongside communities in our hubs. We have 21 of those to tackle low literacy. We support professionals with training and education programs, and we do a lot of work around influencing policymakers and leaders to try and make lasting change. What we want to do is make sure that literacy is not a barrier for anybody. So that's who we are. If you'd like any more information on that, definitely check out our website. There's loads of stuff about the kind of things that we do across the country. Can I have the next one, please? We have been working in alternative provisions specifically since 2019 when we launched Game Changers. So this is our reading programme. It helps promote reading for pleasure. And we launched that obviously before the pandemic hit. One of the pieces of feedback that we got from teachers, it was great and it was brilliant at getting the boys to think about reading. Did we have anything for girls? And so we went for a different lot of funding, which was when we launched our Represent programme. So this one is all about voice. After that, we launched Empower, which is a media literacy programme. We've had Words That Count, which is all about financial literacy. We then launched a Key Stage 4 version of Empower, and you are now here on our Ignite training. So Ignite is the first of what we want to be 3 programmes. This one focuses on motivation and getting students motivated and back into feeling that they belong in the world of learning. So can I have the next one, please? So many students who are excluded or at risk of exclusion, they can often feel that education really isn't for them. They've often had messaging that they didn't really belong within school. It'd be quite difficult to build that sense of belonging with this community of learners. And these, there's a variety of reasons for this. I'm sure you've all got these kinds of students in your schools: additional learning needs, emotional and mental health challenges, experiences of trauma, disrupted schooling, caring responsibilities, and in some cases just not seeing themselves at all reflected in the curriculum. So some of these students have been in intervention since they were in very early primary. For many of them, what they've been offered didn't maybe feel relevant or meaningful to their lives. And in some cases, it might even feel slightly disrespectful to their reality. Often they leave students sometimes feeling a bit patronised and totally disconnected from their world. So what we wanted to create was something with Ignite that puts voice, choice and belonging right at the centre. So it's got self-determination theory at its core, which means that everything is built with 3 things in mind: autonomy, competence and relatedness. And I'll go through the self-determination theory in a minute for those that have not come across it. But you might think of what do we mean when we say voice, choice and belonging? So in terms of voice, we are providing activities that give frequent and varied opportunities for students to express themselves. And that might be verbally or visually, creatively, and in some cases emotionally. So each lesson includes at least one, often I've got lots more than that, discussion or oracy task. often framed by a big question that invites personal reflections or opinions, and students are encouraged to speak in their own words, at first using everyday language and then supported by some of those oracy phrases. Creative responses are built in throughout. We use spoken word, mood boards, visual metaphors, graffiti walls, etc. And we've tried to include alternative formats where possible. So being able to use a voice note, drawings, audio recordings, they're all encouraged for students who communicate differently or find writing difficult. In terms of choice, students aren't told how to think or feel. They're invited to explore the topics in a way that they feel safe and that might be authentic. Tasks in the programme, they offer options, so students can choose a lyric that speaks to them. They can write or voice record in some aspects. They can respond with a sketch or a spoken snippet. Oh, that was a hard word. And we provided you with an adaptations guide, which will give you loads of tools to personalise that delivery based on your students' needs, the setting or the interest. So for example, if you know that a PowerPoint is not going to work within your classroom, we've included some experiential learning ideas that you could put, co-creation. The actual final sessions includes opportunities for the students to design their own lesson cluster around something they care about. So this is building autonomy and repositions the students as kind of active agents in their learning. In terms of belonging, the whole programme is designed to subtly get students to think about belonging. We want them to feel like they belong in those Ignite lessons and start to think about how that feeling of safety was created. So the topics reflect a really broad range of kind of teen culture, student identities, especially those who are often marginalised in mainstream literacy. So topics like gaming or fashion, drill, streetwear, viral media. And the activities are inviting students to reflect on who they are and how they present themselves and how they connect with others. So our lessons are trauma informed and relational, with space for really honest conversations about things like power and identity and motivation and fairness. The classroom is built with trust and emotional safety in mind, and we include things like they have opt-outs, there's no forced sharing, there's multiple ways in which they can contribute. So this is supporting relatedness and helps students see that education can be a space where they're accepted, and it's safe to take those risks. So, and I'll repeat this a lot, the programme is built to be flexible. Although we provide you with all of the activities, we want you to make it yours so that students feel that you can get the most out of it for your students. So this might mean that you take activities out, you move them round, you move the lessons round. Hopefully by the end of the training, once you've seen the way that the programme is structured, you'll feel much more confident to be able to do that. And I will talk a little bit more about adaptations, but we really actively encourage you to find the best pathway through the topics for your students. There is no pressure to follow the slides or to stick to one way of working. As long as the focus stays on motivation, voice and belonging, the students are going to get something out of it, because learning happens when the students feel like it's worth them showing up. Can I have the next one, please? So I spoke about self-determination theory and the 3 strands of it. It's a framework for understanding motivation. So the theory suggests that when 3 key psychological needs are met, people are more likely to be motivated, engaged, and build resilience. So these needs, I've touched them briefly before, but they're autonomy, which is that feeling of having choice and control over what you're doing. The competence, which is feeling like you are good at something or you're getting better at it. And the relatedness, feeling like you matter and you belong and that you're connected to others. So many students that we've come across who are either in alternative provision or who are at risk of exclusion have had experiences of disempowerment in school. And often by the time they're sitting in your classroom, they might have experienced being told what to do when they didn't see the relevance, judged publicly as behind, or they might have been made to feel like they don't belong, or that belonging is conditional on them not being themselves. So self-determination theory gives us a really great starting point. So instead of compliance, we're focusing on motivation. And instead of looking for a fix, we're trying to change the environment around them or give them the tools to do that. So supporting autonomy can increase engagement. There was a study in 2006 by Reeve and Zhang. I won't go into the research too much, but if anybody's interested, I'm happy to send you my pages and pages of researches on it. But they found that teachers who used autonomy supportive training, which was offering meaningful choices, acknowledging students' perspectives, these students showed greater conceptual understanding as well as better engagement and motivation. So teens in particular respond really well in environments where they've got some control and voice, this study found. In 2003, another study found that relatedness matters a lot more than we think. So that feeling connected to teachers or their peers predicts emotional and behavioural engagement in learning. This is actually an American study. It was done with middle and high school students, but it found that when teenagers feel like they belong, they try harder and stick with challenging tasks. And then the last study I'm just going to talk about very briefly is about competence and how it boosts effort and persistence. This is a really old study. This was done in 1991, but it's been replicated a number of times. And this study found that perceived competence is critical for intrinsic motivation. I'm sure many of you have come across this before. If you think you can do something, you are more likely to be able to. So when a student feels like they can do something, they're far more likely to want to. And interventions that break learning into achievable steps and give regular positive feedback can significantly increase participation in teens. So now I've blasted you with the science. We'll go into like what it will look like sort of overall. Can I have the next slide, please, Simone? So this is our zoomed out version of Ignite. It's made up of 20 sessions and they are grouped into clusters. Each cluster explores a theme that would hold some interest with young people, not just to engage them, but to give them a space to connect to identity, culture, and voice. So they won't connect deeply with every topic, but that's kind of part of the point, really, of the programme. Learning to find connections in things that you don't automatically interest you is a skill that will help them in a lot of areas in the curriculum. There is a clear arc to the programme. The early clusters, like music and comedy, build confidence. They use strong oracy and identity-based hooks. Later clusters, like gaming and fashion, they stretch reading stamina a little bit more. They ask students to reflect a little bit more deeply. That being said, although it is designed with an arc, the clusters don't rely on each other. And there's nothing in the lessons that would mean if you did the cluster in a different order, it would mean it wouldn't work. So there's just nothing that would make it prohibitive. So if you want to switch them around, that's completely possible. So if you know that fashion is going to grab your students, start there. And if you know you've got a group full of gamers and that they feel safe, begin with that one. So the self-determination theory is embedded throughout. We support autonomy by offering choice and real-world topics. The competence is there by scaffolding the complex text. Actually, the very first text in the music one is the most difficult text within the programme. And there's a reason that we've placed it there. It's to give them that confidence that they can tackle things that are hard. So we nurture relatedness through talk, connection, and that honest reflection. So this is kind of like the overview of what the programme will look like. We'll go into the lessons in a little bit more detail now. Can I have the next one, please? So every session in Ignite follows a really consistent structure, but how you deliver it is totally up to you. So you might use slides or sketchbooks or graffiti boards or whatever works for you. The sequence helps students know what to expect, and that predictability can support emotional safety. We've paid close attention to the reading demands across the programme. So I mentioned it briefly, but the music text is possibly the most difficult in the whole programme, despite being in that first cluster. It's got a reading age that's really high, it's got complex ideas, and it's got vocabulary that even an adult probably doesn't use on a daily basis. So you might think, what on earth are they doing here? You know, why have they put this first? And what we wanted to show is because with the right support, especially through the pre-teaching of the vocab at the beginning and the way that they look at the structure of that first paragraph, they can access a challenging text and be successful with it. And that builds that competence and pride right out of the gate. Later on in the gaming and fashion, the texts are longer, but they're not harder. So they help students to build reading stamina and confidence in navigating a full text. And we know that relevance helps motivation. However, again, if you know that actually, you know, a 2-page article is way too much for your students, then don't do it all. You know, take chunks out, choose the bits that you want. I'll talk about how we would adapt later. But what we want is for you to make this yours in whatever way that looks like. So we know as well that the consistent format works really well for some students. However, for some, it makes it boring. They don't like that. And we've had really conflicting feedback since we launched Game Changers. We had it for Game Changers and Represent and Empower. Some people absolutely love the format, the consistent structure. It helps their students feel really safe. Some of them don't like it at all because actually their students want something different every lesson, otherwise it's boring. And obviously what we've given you is a framework, and then you can find a pathway through that. And we've given you examples within the teacher guides about ways in which you can change those lessons around, move things so that it seems a little bit more exciting if that's what your students need. It might be that you need that calm, that routine, or it might be that you need to switch everything up. But again, as well as for the students choosing the order, that's kind of like autonomy in action. It might be that you ask them. So before we dig into any of the adaptations, though, let's have a look at what a typical lesson looks like. So we'll start at the beginning. We'll start with the do now lesson, with the do now part of the session. Can I have the next one, please? So I'm going to start by saying you don't need to be able to read any of this. They're just examples, give you a flavour of what the workbook style and the PowerPoint looks like. So the one that is landscape is what the PowerPoint would look like, and then the portrait page is the workbook. So each lesson includes a do now task. This is a really short, independent task that helps students get to know the learning space quietly and with purpose. So it's a chance to settle and focus and start thinking about the theme of the lesson in a really low stakes way. So it's especially useful at the start of the session to support transitions, calm the group energy, or create a purposeful atmosphere. It was actually a teacher in the pilot who asked us to put these in. They found it really helpful for calming the energy at the start of the session. That being said, these tasks do not need to stay at the start. So the example that I've got on the slide for this one is from the fashion cluster. So the trainer design task is from lesson 2, and it asks students to design their perfect trainers. The workbook's got some templates that they can draw onto, or you might decide to give them some plain paper. Instructions are really easy. You know, it's asking them to create what their perfect trainers would look like. You would literally need that one sentence of instruction and then maybe some coloured pencils out, and they could be left to get on with that whilst the rest of the group came in or whilst you got your lesson set up. However, it doesn't need to go at the beginning of a lesson. If you feel that actually after an oracy task they could do with some calm, that it might be that you want to switch it over and put it there. You know, some students will focus very much on brands and status, others go for the colours and patterns or something symbolic. And, you know, that's the point with this. It's a way in to bigger questions about how we use fashion to say who we are. So don't feel locked into the structure. You know, use the do now when it works best for your group. As with all of the elements, treat them kind of as tools rather than rules. Can I have the next one, please? So our do now, after our do now task, we move into the big question. This is a short oracy focused activity. It's designed to surface students' initial thoughts, instincts, and opinions. So you'll notice on the slide that I've shown you the kind of big PowerPoint form for this one, and so you can see where the teacher notes are. This big question has got some options about how you would go about delivering this, and the teacher notes underneath have got some kind of examples about options and ways about going for that. This is always the same though for this part of the activity. It's not about the right answer here. It's about giving everyone a voice really early in the lesson. So these questions are deliberately open-ended and emotionally resonant, and students are encouraged to revisit the answers later on. So it's powerful to notice when and why their opinions change. And this kind of reflection can strengthen both the thinking and the communication. We also know that oracy isn't something that every student finds easy. So each lesson includes scaffolding, that's what you can see from the workbook, that would allow them to participate. It could be something from sentence starters to visual prompts to discussion frames. We use a lot of varied formats. We have pairs, trios, group discussions, silent conversations, movement-based statements. These are all contained in the teacher and adaptations guide. And the adaptations guide will give you even more ways to support and stretch that oracy. The emphasis is on voice isn't accidental with this. It's grounded in research and advocacy. So I'm sure many of you saw the letter that was coordinated by Voice 21 in July, possibly just after you finished for the holidays. But you know, with the 60 signatories, some of them really high profile, like Michael Rosen or Estelle Morris, they were urging the Prime Minister to embed oracy into England schools. And as they pointed out, it's well evidenced as a low cost, high impact intervention. And it improves academic outcomes, confidence, life chances, especially for students who are from disadvantaged backgrounds. So it's something that we've pushed throughout this, those oracy activities. Can I have the next one? Let me just check the chat. Okay, so if you are interested in the programs, the details of those are on our website at the moment. And John has asked about the reading ages for every text within the booklet. We don't have these at the moment. It's not something we did when we created them, but I will look into it. So the next part of the lesson would be the vocabulary part, and I'm going to be very honest, this is the most marmitey part of the programme. Some teachers love it, others find it harder to engage their students with. Universally, the students don't really like this part, and we get it. The vocabulary section is deliberately structured before the reading because we know from the research that the explicit pre-teaching boosts comprehension and reading confidence. We know that it works particularly well with those with lower prior attainment or those who've had disrupted schooling. So there's a study from 2002 which showed that students need to encounter and use a word multiple times in meaningful context to truly understand them. There's some really, really old studies that like from way back in the 80s that talk about how vocabulary improves comprehension more than past experiences. So that being said, the students don't always like the vocabulary tasks at all. What we wanted to try and make them relevant. So we designed them in multiple different ways. They can draw or sketch the words. They can use emojis or symbols to represent it. They can translate it into everyday or street language. We've tried using that one first. So it might be that you introduce the vocabulary with what do you call it when, and then you might give them the definition and ask them, do they have a word for that? Before you can match or the words, the dictionary kind of meanings and examples. But each of these clusters has got 6 vocabulary words and that they'll feature for the full cluster. So revisiting the keywords in later lessons is really key in terms of embedding that. And the goal is to build ownership, not just word banks. So we want the students to see powerful language isn't just for exams, it's for their own self-expression, their arguments, their connection and their belongings. Can you just pop the next bit on? It's like a pop-up bit. Yeah. So for those students who are really, really struggling, it might be that we've offered like some examples where it's almost all done for them. So we've given them motivation. We've given them some examples of what might that be. So what makes you care enough to try, get you interested. And then we might ask them to just match an emoji to something. What do they think best represents that word? For those that have got those lower literacy skills. Can I have the next one? So this again is from our fashion cluster. So this is right near the end. So you'll see the text for this is really quite long. Although Ignite is a motivational program and it's about helping students see themselves as learners, we have built it around a literacy framework. There is a focus upon reading, and each lesson contains kind of a reading text It's designed to develop students' information retrieval, comprehension and inference skills. And these texts have been kind of carefully selected or created in some cases to link real world topics so that students can see the point of reading them. So they vary in length and complexity. Some are really short and punchy, others are going to stretch stamina a little bit. All are written with teen interest and challenge in mind. And you don't need to read them all exactly as they're written or use every question provided. As with the other sections, adapt the delivery. If you think that a text feels too long, select a short section out of it to read or do it in chunks. If the students switch off from listening to your voice all the time, ask someone else to record it. Invite a guest reader. We saw within the pilot before the summer, that don't underestimate the power of hearing the text read aloud by the head teacher, one of their teaching assistants, a pastoral lead, or a teacher in a different department. Particularly if students have got links with teachers in different departments that they respect. It adds that variety, and it signals that English isn't where reading belongs. It matters beyond those English intervention lessons. And there's question support at all levels, from simple fact finding to higher order thinking skills. However, we recommend not skipping the kind of higher order thinking for students who are struggling still with comprehension. A lot of these connect what they're reading to the wider world. And that's something that we really value, that kind of connection. And so allowing them to access some of those questions that connect the text to the wider world can be really helpful. So research shows us that when students are supported to make those personal, cultural and emotional connections to text, the comprehension improves and the motivation increases. You'll also notice that the text isn't on any of the PowerPoints. We were given some training and some advice from sort of experts who were looking at cognitive loads. And when reading is a class activity, the focus needs to remain in one place. So ideally the workbook. So it avoids that divided attention and the cognitive overload, allowing students to fully engage with the text and the discussion. So there's a lot of research that backs this, and cognitive psychology and educational research are consistently showing that asking a student to split their attention between the teacher's speech, reading a text on the board or a slide when it's also in their workbook can be overwhelming. So in order to reduce that, it's called the split attention effect. All of the big texts are kept off the PowerPoints. Can I have the next one? Thank you. So as well as the reading text, there'll then be some kind of oracy or creative task. And this is one of the most important parts of the session for many students, because there are choices there. For many students, especially those who struggle with those traditional settings, speaking is an entry point to learning, and they might shut down when asked to write, but flourish when given the chance to talk. So we've tried to include a variety of different oracy tasks that would allow them to respond to what they've read. We use a lot of the things that you'll be familiar with, things like talk trios, the ranking activity, discussion prompts, to help students explore multiple viewpoints. So we want them to practice challenging their own thoughts and feelings, hearing others out, justifying their opinions. And that's powerful, not just for literacy, but for identity and inclusion too. This matters because many excluded or at-risk students feel like their voice doesn't matter. And so giving them space to speak can validate that. And oracy helps students practice making and defending those choices. Students often feel safer expressing a half-formed idea out loud in speech than writing it down, where it's a little bit more permanent. So we've got lots of sentence starters within the workbooks that are there in order to scaffold them. However, again, if you find that might be overwhelming for your students, don't use them. You might write one or two of them on a card. Encourage the quiet reflection before speaking. It gives time to boost their thinking and the quality of what they say. But again, it's very much for you to decide how you want to run this activity. So the PowerPoint is an example there of ways in which they might engage with some of these questions. You might decide that you want to focus on two and split them across two slides. You might decide that you want to focus on just one of those questions. It's entirely up to you. And then our last part is the reflection. So each Ignite lesson ends with a structured reflection, and it isn't about summarising. This is a chance for students to consolidate how they felt and why it matters, rather than just what they've learned. So the reflection space can be really powerful, and it helps make that learning stick, but it also builds identity and voice and agency, which are all key components of the literacy and belonging that we're trying to build. So we made this a priority because it builds metacognitive awareness. It's students practice thinking about their thinking. So it supports that autonomy and motivation. The students are considering what mattered most to them within the lesson. It's often quite low pressure. You can use a creative format. There are sentence stems on the PowerPoint if you choose to, send prompts on the PowerPoint if you choose to use them. You might choose not to. Students often find it easier to connect to a lesson when they're asked to make it personal. So it can help them to feel like this isn't just schoolwork, it's their ownership of their learning. We saw a school who were on the initial pilot who loved the journals. They had a specific journal that they wrote in at the ends of each lesson. They had stickers and washi tape to decorate them as well. And the students, that was I think from about halfway through the lesson, they were asking the teacher, is it journals yet? Is it journals yet? And they popped down kind of like what they connected with, or they might have used prompts from the questions. Some of them would draw how they'd felt with some of the points. It was really quite powerful actually, and there was 3 students who used them not just within the lesson. They had a separate one which they were using to regulate between sessions. We have some training on journaling as a concept from another project that we ran called Represent, which when I email out the password and the link for the PowerPoints and stuff, I will pop that in there as well in case anybody wants to go and have a little look at journaling in a little bit more depth. And that's it for kind of the overview of the programme. That's the way the lessons are built. That's the way that the programme is structured. So I'll briefly go through now kind of the adaptation side, and then we'll get to you asking any questions that you've got. So we do know for a lot of these students that the usual classroom routines don't always work, and that's okay because this is about motivation and belonging, not necessarily a rigid format. So one of the most important things to know about Ignite, and I know you'll be sick of me saying this by now, it's not a rigid programme. It's designed to be flexible, creative and responsive to your students. And that means it's not just okay to adapt, it's encouraged. So this is an example of one of the ways that you might adapt one of the lessons that means that you're not maybe relying so much on the PowerPoint or a workbook heavy session. Some students really love the workbooks because they look quite nice and it feels like, oh, this is mine and there's ownership over them. Some of them, they're quite frightening because they're, very chunky. So it's entirely up to you how you want to go about using those. The suggested delivery approach up on the screen now doesn't utilize them as much. So it might be that that's the method that you want to go. If the slides are feeling cold or too formal to a start of the lesson, maybe use something more physical or sensory. So we provide you with an emotion poster wheel as well that you will have seen. It can be a really great way to engage students, help them with kind of naming those feelings and how they're feeling without pressure. It helps build emotional literacy and supports regulation. So if students are coming in dysregulated or distracted, that kind of emotional check-in at the beginning can be a substitute for the do now task, or it might be something that you decide to do as well. It's entirely up to you. So instead of asking for raised hands or silent writing, creating a shared space for opinions can work quite well. So we've included ideas about discussion circles with a talking object, a graffiti wall where students can add their views on a post-it. Again, it builds relatedness. It shows that everyone's voice has got value. However, the first time that you do it, it might look quite messy. While students get used to kind of a new way of working, if it's not something they've done before. And this is where it's really important to find out why the students are struggling to share or engage with what it is. Where are the sticking points? You can then maybe adapt to using a lower stakes, maybe a voting option, or try a silent conversation. So rather than starting with the list of vocabs, for example, you might do that, ask what you call it when. And the reading section is all about keeping that cognitive load manageable, and it gives you more ways to engage. It's difficult to write a program that's about motivation and cater to every single reading age that's out there. So we've provided text, and then based on your kind of professional experience, you can choose which chunks of the text that you might want to do. It might be that you want to shorten them. It could be that you want to deliver additional, it might be that you want to make it more difficult depending on the group that you've got in front of you. So in terms of making it a little bit more experiential, can I have the next one, please, Simone? This is just some examples that we added in about ways that you can help make it that little bit less like desk learning. So these are all from the comedy ones. If I just look at the one that's at the bottom, the meme surgery is using school appropriate memes that they might come across online that rely on stereotypes or dark humor. And in small groups, the students would operate them on them. So they would label the stereotypes, they would rework the joke to keep the humor but remove the harm, those kind of things. Can I have the next little bit? There's some from the fashion one there. One of them involves like a pop-up wardrobe, so giving students actual physical clothing to help them to create the character. There's loads of examples of way that you can make it a little bit more hands-on. Next slide, please. We've also used AI. It's something we were asked to do to build student competence with this. However, the AI we use is to build student competence, not replace their thinking. So at its heart, Ignite is using the AI to help students feel more capable. So more confidence expressing ideas, trying things out, and reflecting critically on the world around them. We've been really intentional. This isn't about AI doing the work, it's about scaffolded support. So student might generate ideas with AI, then rework them, challenge them, or develop their own thinking further. So for example, a student might ask AI to give them a framework to help them write something. They might ask it to help them generate ideas or help them with their first paragraph. They then improve it, critique it, rewrite it in their voice. It's a springboard, not necessarily a shortcut. So because our focus is having these students feel more motivated to learn, this is why we've used this as a way to help them feel more competent. So there's also structured activities that introduce students' courage to question the fairness or bias of the AI outputs. This means that they're learning not just how to use AI, but how to think about it critically. So for example, in the sports section, students look at 2 images that have been created by AI. It actually was when we were trying to decorate a PowerPoint, and it turns out to become part of the lesson. I asked AI for a team that was in Harmony and a team that was in Discord because I just needed some illustrations for something. And what it spat out was really quite interesting. The team that are in Harmony are all women. The team that are in Discord are men, and the ethnicities of those men as well was a stereotype that I think we want to be challenging too. It's one of the things that AI is a really useful tool, but we need to see it for what it is. It's based on data that already exists, and we know there are biases in the world, and it's making sure that students are aware of those as well. So it went from decorating a PowerPoint to being an actual activity within the lesson. So for staff, we've included delivery notes to help you with any of these. We've given you a little bit of a guide to help make AI a little bit more safer, so more suitable answers for setting up AI, giving it a prompt first of all, so that it knows that it's dealing with children. However, AI is an unknown, and it's important that you test some of these things on your school network first, because the response that we get on our kind of networks and what you will get in school is also going to be different. We also want students to think about how they can effectively craft those prompts that they give to AI. Effective prompts usually mean giving AI greater detail around the purpose, the audience, the format, something that's really transferable in the English curriculum. Seeing the poorer quality output from AI where the information it's given isn't quite as powerful, can actually be really helpful in teaching them why purpose, audience, and format is so important in writing. And finally, and this is the big takeaway, you can choose whether to use AI or not. We said before that we wanted autonomy for students. We also want autonomy for you. If you are not comfortable with it, Ignite is able to be run without the use of any AI tool. You could still do the activity with the pictures and talk about it, but we have made sure that you are able to run it if you either don't have the technology or don't feel confident enough to be using it in the classroom. So it's all completely, you know, either way is fine, whether you're AI curious or AI cautious. Maybe you've got a suite of tablets, maybe you've got no access to technology, it will still work. And repeat again, it's about your autonomy as well as the student, so you choose what you'd like to do with that. So the resources, I've just noticed this has come up in the chat. So the Ignite digital resources are available in the link that I'm about to pop into the chat now. I will send this out in an email afterwards as well, but the link is there. The password is underneath. It needs the capital letters, just so everyone knows it is case sensitive. I'm also going to pop in some research that we've just published about AI and using it to support literacy, if you are interested. Yeah. Sorry, can I have that next slide? I think that's it. Yeah, so your resources will look like this. They won't have the full file. That was me screenshotting before Simone had a chance to get rid of the last one. There's 3 folders in there that have got the PowerPoints, any extra sheets that you might need or want, and the teacher resources. So the adaptations guide, a detailed teacher guide. So if the quick start one you want a little bit more of, there's a detailed one with it all in great depth if that's something that you're interested in looking at. They're all in that folder. You download them as little zip files, and then they are yours to adapt in whichever way that you want. So next bit, please. The many of your audience, the people that you're going to be delivering this to, will have experienced trauma in some way. Sometimes complex, sometimes it's still ongoing. This might show up as withdrawal or anger or distrust or even hyper independence in those learning spaces. So we have made this so that it's trauma-informed practice. However, Ignite doesn't require you to be a therapist in any way. It's just helping you create conditions that are trauma-aware by design. So that starts with the predictability. Every session follows the same rhythm. Students know what to expect, which can build trust and reduce anxiety. The materials use kind of warm human tone, and many of the activities start from personal experience or a really low stakes connection. Students are invited in, they're not tested or caught out, and choice is really central. Students don't have to speak in front of others if they're not ready. They can reflect in writing, or they can draw, or they can record a message if you've got the facilities to do that. We prioritise psychological safety over performance. And in fact, we actually teach that term as one of the vocabulary words within the sport cluster. The goal is not to fix anything. It's just to offer consistent opportunity for them to feel heard and safe and successful. And crucially, relationships are a really big part of this intervention. So it will be your kind of tone and flexibility that helps make the difference. So that's kind of our trauma-informed practice. So I'll just finish off with our final kind of tips that we got from the first pilot. Can the next one, please, Simone? So these just reflect what we saw work in best practice over the summer for those students who'd had kind of disruptive or negative experiences. So start with adaptation. So the Ignite framework is going to give you a structure, but it's not rigid. I know you'd be bored of me saying this by now. Use that structure flexibly to meet the needs of your students. Use your professional judgments and your understanding of the group. It's okay to slow down, to skip, to swap activities. It's entirely up to you. It's really helpful if you explain the purpose of the task. So many of the students switch off because they don't see the point. So showing how a task can link to real life can be really helpful. We saw this modelled when we were out looking at some of these lessons, and it was really, really effective. So linking activities to real life skills like communication or self-expression or their future opportunities will help with the buy-in. Celebrate the oracy in a way that's really inclusive. So students might not speak confidently yet. So celebrate listening, having a go, sitting in the classroom. We saw a student when we were looking at the pilot program who was sitting in the lessons, and that was big for her. She'd been on a corridor for almost a year. So the fact that she was sitting in the lessons and she'd said 2 or 3 things was huge. So, you know, celebrate everything. It builds confidence over time. Praise that kind of active listening or the thoughtful input, not just perfect speech. So we also found that modeling our ability to change our opinions or show that we weren't perfect worked really well with students, helping build trust. It invites kind of students in. We found that offering students choice wherever you can also helps with autonomy and motivation. So often there are lots of options, which can be really overwhelming. You know, it's a double-edged sword here. You offer them lots of options. It's overwhelming for where to start. You reduce the options and they have no choice. And I completely understand that this is a really fine line to walk. But offering choice in the ways in which students can respond. Do they want to write it? Do they want to speak it? Do they want to draw it? Do they want to record themselves? It might be that one student is speaking, the other one has decided to draw, and that's fine, that, you know, they're still learning. We found that going slow if you need to is really helpful. There was one teacher that told us that it took her almost 5 lessons to do the first 2. After that, they were going at a much greater pace, but it took a while to build the safety. So don't rush that connection. You know, celebrate those small wins. And finally, your relationship, we found with the students, is the most powerful thing in the room. They were the foundations that made everything else possible. So thank you very much for that lot of information that you've just listened to. I'm going to go and check the chat now if there's any questions. And if you've got any more, you want to come off mute or you'd like to pop in the chat, I'll answer those now.